Hello and welcome to a brand new season of Colorectal Live from Johnson & Johnson Institute and Ethicon. I'm Richard Brady and it's an absolute thrill to be joining you tonight on the launch of our 2021 global series of interviews exploring surgical excellence. Firstly, thanks to all of our hundreds of thousands of viewers last year. We've been absolutely delighted with the online response and engagement, and you can look at all our previous interviews online by searching Twitter using the hashtag ColorectalLIVE, and look out for our upcoming website with all our past interviewees and details of our upcoming season available very soon. Now, tonight I'm really excited to be joined by Professor Sam Atallah. Sam is one of the world's best-known colorectal surgeons. He's the originator of TAMIS, a pioneer in robotic transanal surgery, and a leader in advanced colorectal techniques. Sam is a professor of surgery at the University of Central Florida. He has a hybrid academic and private practice at the Winter Park Memorial Hospital and Advent Health Orlando, and he is also present at the Endosurgical Center of Florida. Sam tonight will be interviewed on his career, his practice-changing innovations, clinical interests, and on his key role in surgical innovation. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Sam, especially for kicking us off to our Colorectal Live 2021 season.
Richard, thank you so much for having me, and hello to you from across the pond in Orlando, Florida.
Well, this is really exciting, and I think one thing we want to start off with is getting to know you a little bit better, Sam. So can you tell us a little bit about your family background and what made you become a surgeon?
Thank you, Richard. So I was actually born and raised in Saudi Arabia. And science was always part of my growing up. My father is a math and science teacher and a little workshop at home. So I grew up, soldering circuits and learning how to do things. My dad would build things like TVs. And so science and this sort of thing was always in my upbringing and background in Saudi Arabia. At age 14, I immigrated to the United States. I came here on my own, went to boarding school, and my thrill and interest in science began to really grow there.
Now, Sam, you are well known as being pretty big into music. Can you tell me how that has influenced your decision-making approach to life and maybe innovation?
Absolutely. So, yeah, music has always been it's something that I, grew up with ever since age 12 when I picked up the electric guitar. I've been in bands ever since. And for a while, when you hit your adolescent years, you kind of just want to be with the cool kids and everything's about being cool with your friends. Fortunately, I started getting interested in some bands that were very interested or had a lot of intellect to them, bands like REM and Rush. And that sort of helped me understand that you could actually do music and be intellectual and be into academics. And that helped me kind of resolve those two opposite extremes.
Right, Sam, can you tell me how you specifically became molded into a career in colorectal surgery? Was that a predefined path or were there other options?
Well, thank you, Richard. Great question. So first, I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do in life. And I don't think anyone at age 18 really does. But late in college, I got interested in science and zoology and biology and those sorts of things. And I went on to do a year of graduate school. And after that, I went on to join a lab in Dallas, Texas, under a principal investigator by the name of Glenn Evans, who was a fantastic role model for me. At that time, I was very interested in molecular genetics and DNA science and these sorts of things. And he told me, you should go on to medical school. And I took his advice.
Now, Sam, can you tell me about the kind of key moments? You've mentioned a few individuals that you've met so far that seem to have been very influential. But when you look back at your life and the journey that you've taken to date, what are the key moments? What are the things that you remember most?
So when I was a resident, I was a fourth-year resident, I had a chance encounter with Michael DeBakey, and he had a huge influence on me. obviously for all the great things that he's done as a pioneer and innovator in surgery. And I asked him, do you think that era is over? Do you think it's all been said and done? Do you think there's anything new left to be done, or is all the innovation been already established in medicine and surgery? And he laughed at me. He said, absolutely. We are still down here, and we got a long way to go before we get to our peak. And he kind of had me rethink things that I thought, at this point in medicine, this was in the mid 2000s, everything was already done, and all inventions in medicine and surgery have already been created. But that wasn't the fact.
Now, Sam, we clearly are speaking tonight amongst a pretty serious part of global history, which is the current pandemic. And I know that you personally were touched last year by your contact with COVID-19 and relations. Can you tell us about that? And also, can you update us as to how things are where you are at present?
Absolutely. So yes, last year I was personally touched by it because early on in the pandemic, my wife contracted the virus and she was ill for some time and hospitalized. And fortunately, she's recovered. But listen, Richard, the pandemic has left no part of the earth untouched, and we've all been affected and had to kind of cope with this, both on personal levels and for you and I in our medical field and our surgical field. We have to deal with patients, some of which have COVID, but many others have been sheltering at home with some forms of disease that require medical attention, but they're too afraid to go to the hospital and seek medical care. So folks with their colon and rectal cancers are not seeking medical attention because they're afraid to go to the hospital, fear of contracting COVID, and also they're afraid to leave their house for fear of contracting the virus. So we've had to kind of wrestle with that. And in our hospital system, it's in a state of constant flux. And we have to balance out availability and capacity to manage folks who have COVID and the resources required to take care of them with those folks who really need surgery, for example, for colorectal malignancies.
Now, Sam, during this series, we're talking to those at the top of the field, and we're going international this year with ColorectalLIVE. Can you tell us about, for our international audience, the American health system, and particularly about your hybrid practice? How is that set up, and what is unique and different about that kind of practice that maybe our global audience need to understand more about?
Well, definitely. I think I pride myself in sort of taking care of patients as people, not as protocol numbers. And while we're very active in research and science, we also recognize the importance of treating everybody individually and this sort of individualized medicine. Fortunately, also, I'm able to offer a multitude of advanced techniques for the surgical treatment of colorectal cancer and other ailments using laparoscopy, robotics, and advanced transanal techniques that hopefully we'll also discuss later on.
Now, Sam, you're also known for teaching students. You have a university role. Can you tell us about the kind of tools that you use as an innovator to teach medical students and surgical trainees and really get them up to speed with high quality knowledge?
Great, that's a good question. We use a multitude, sort of a multi-prong approach to teaching medical students, fellows, and other learners at different levels. But what I like to do best is in my office, I have a giant chalkboard, and we do chalkboard lessons where I believe that we need to have interactive teaching. I believe in the Socratic method and being able to converse and discuss pathology and disease processes rather than just sort of feed folks PowerPoint presentations. I like to have an interactive educational session. So that's one thing that's unique about my educational approach.
So, Sam, I'm absolutely bowled over that you're using a chalkboard to teach students. And we're talking about the cutting edge of surgical innovation tonight, but it just goes to show that you need to get people engaged with the subject matter, irrespective of the means. Now, Sam, we're going to turn to your real great expertise, and that is TAMIS. You know, and I know that you've led the world in TAMIS. Can you tell us how you started that journey? Who was helping you at the time? And how was it that you became the person who performed the world's first TAMIS?
Thank you for that question, Richard. And I'll start by saying that nothing happens in a vacuum, and you need to give credit where credit is due. So, TAMIS was developed by myself, my senior partner today, Sergio LaRoche, and Matthew Albert. We kind of developed that together. Yes, I was fortunate enough to do the first TAMIS operation, but at the time we were thinking about ways that we could do advanced.
Well, I think we've just cut out there for a second from our connections across the pond, but these kind of things happen in live interviews. So now we'll go back to Sam and catch up with the background of TAMIS. Thanks, Sam. Sorry about that. Let's catch up again.
No problem. So, in our hospital system, I wanted to come up with a way to do advanced transanal surgery, and we didn't have the capacity to do that because we didn't have the TEM technology, which was the analog to TAMIS at the time. And so what is it they say? That invention, the mother of invention, is necessity. And it was out of necessity that TAMIS was born. At the time, I was using single port myself. Dr. Albert, Dr. LaRoche, we were using single port technology for colectomies, and we realized that this can now be applied transanally to allow us to do procedures transanally, TAMIS, for local excision of tumors.
Well, Sam, just for the global audience, I'm going to step back a little bit and ask you to explain the principles and background of TAMIS to us in a sort of simple terms that we can all understand.
Sure. So TAMIS allows us to use ordinary laparoscopic gear and equipment applied transanally to operate within the lumen to do high quality excision. And we've learned and we've shown that if you do local excisions of cancer using high quality techniques like with TAMIS and like with TEM, that the oncologic outcomes are better. Patients do better. And so that is the impetus behind TAMIS.
So that's great, and they say that if you understand a subject, you can explain it simply, and that you did.
Right.
So let's bring us to our first poll of the evening, Sam. We'd like to know what our audience think about their experience with TAMIS, and we're going to ask them to head over to J&J Medical Devices UK Twitter channel now to cast their vote. Option A is don't perform and not wishing to perform TAMIS. Option B, don't perform but wish to. Option C, perform currently and in training. And option D, did perform but don't any longer. And we'll reveal the results of those Twitter polls at the end of this show. So Sam, back to our main questions. Did TAMIS change your view on innovation in surgery, and how do you innovate?
Absolutely. It changed my approach to innovation in surgery. It made me understand that you could innovate. This goes back to what DeBakey told me when I was a fourth-year resident, where I almost took it like tongue-in-cheek, like, oh, no, come on, everything already has been innovated until TAMIS. And I realized, wow, up until that point, really up until the decade of 2009, 2010, we hadn't seen a lot of innovation in colorectal surgery. Yeah, we were starting to do a lot of laparoscopic and robotic colorectal surgery, but laparoscopy and robotics in and of themselves were not novel or innovative because they were already around. So to me, this was the beginning of realizing so much more could be done.
So, Sam, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the offshoots of TAMIS, TATMI,
Sure.
robotic transanal work. For a global audience, and they're really hot topics at the minute, as you well know. Where are we going with these technologies at the present time?
Well, I think TATME, when we were part of the groups that developed, this was developed by Pat Sill and Antonio Lacey, but we were the first in Orlando to show you could use a TAMIS port to do this sort of rectal cancer surgery where we do an extirpation or removal of the entire rectum transanally. It was a solution to a problem. And the problem was that for for rectal cancer surgery, for very low-lying tumors, it's extremely difficult for us to remove that with sphincter preservation. TATME was part of the solution to that, especially in morbidly obese male patients who already had a narrow pelvis, and in other sorts of situations like this where access from above is extremely limited. We realize you can go from below. So I do think TATME has immense value and will continue to be used. And in the right hands, the outcomes are good. So that's part of it, Richard. The other part is the ability to use robotic transanal approaches. So the analog for laparoscopy has always been robotics. And if you can do it laparoscopically, can you try to do it robotically? And early on in about 2010, 2011, right after developing TAMIS, I went to the lab to see if we could do this, in fact, robotically, robotic transanal surgery, and found it to be feasible, not only for TAMIS and local excision, but also for transanal total mesorectal excision, and later on, navigated surgery.
I mean, this kind of technology blows my mind, Sam. So it's amazing to hear you describe it in such terms and to be able to speak to you at the heart of that innovative core. And because you are a proliferative innovator, I'd really like to explore some of those issues with you. Now, last year you were an author, you published Digital Surgery, and you've become a leader in digital surgery. And you've spoken often about computer-aided surgery. So generally, can you tell us why this is important to the field of colorectal surgery going forward? And specifically, and this is where I think the important bit is, how is it relevant to those who are outside those specialist centers?
Well, those are great questions, Richard. So I think more globally, the idea of digital surgery doesn't just apply to colorectal surgery. It applies to an idea of using information to help guide the surgeon. Let's think of a pilot flying at night, right? They can't see out the window. They can only see darkness. How do they fly an airplane and land it on a runway in fog in the middle of the night? They do it using information. So I think the future of surgery generally is to harness that information through navigated surgery, through fluorescent dyes, targeted dyes, and other means to help guide the surgeon into understanding better the surgical field when that surgical field is complex.
Thanks for that, Sam. And I think this is an appropriate point probably to introduce our second poll of the evening. So for those at home, what do you think is the most impactful innovation in colorectal surgery in the next 5 years? Is it stereotactic surgery, endoluminal robotics, artificial intelligence, or virtual reality guided surgery? We'd like to know what you think. And again, we'll be returning to the answers of those polls at the end of this interview tonight. And if you want to cast your vote, please head over to J&J Medical Devices UK Twitter channel now. Now, back to questions, Sam. Your work on navigated stereotactic resection, guidance in resections is groundbreaking. How do you see that becoming mainstream in the next few years?
Well, I don't know that it'll be mainstream in the next few years. This is something that is still under investigation. But the idea is, how can we take in a fixed space, like in the pelvis, how can we define that region anatomically and then navigate through it to help us do two things? One is remove a tumor that is our target, and two, prevent damage or injury to structures we don't want to injure, right? Like the male urethra or other structures. Okay, so that's where navigated surgery, once again, the analogy that works is aviation and the ability to use navigated information to help guide a pilot. The same thing can be applied to navigating or guiding a surgeon through an anatomic field. Thus, the surgeon of the future navigates through information as much as they do through anatomic planes.
So, Sam, I'm going to ask a favor, and maybe you can tell us what your current favorite innovation is. What's on the horizon? Can you give us a little insight into what really excites you in terms of innovations within colorectal surgery?
My gosh, lots of things excite me, but perhaps most so is the prospect of robotic endoluminal surgery. Now, this is a new area that I think is really poised to take off in the next 5 years, not 10 years, but 5 years. And we already have working models, if you will, with human trials underway.
Now, Sam, this kind of field all comes under advanced colorectal surgery. Can you tell us, what does that mean to you? What in this day and age, is there a difference in terms of the practitioners who practice advanced colorectal surgery? What does that umbrella term mean?
That's a great question, Richard. I think it's an amalgam of many different things. It is the advent of robotics, endoluminal robotics. It's the advent of not only endoluminal robotics, but using digital information and digital surgery via artificial intelligence. A lot of the AI that's coming in surgery, both also for colorectal surgery, will involve a big section of that will be computer vision, computer-aided vision, which is predicated upon an AI model and using cloud robotics, or basically cloud surgery, where we harness the computational power of the cloud to do a lot of these computer intensive calculations that are needed for advanced computer vision.
Well, that's a truly remarkable, and if I could say so, intimidating insight, Sam. But now we've come to that bit of the interview, which I know that you've been excited about. As you say, many things excite you, and that this will be one of them, our quick fire questions. Now, single sentence answers only, please, if you can, and cue the music. Now, Sam, let's start off with, what's been your single best day at work?
Easy. June 30th, 2009, the day I did the first TAMIS operation.
That's a brilliant answer, Sam. So let me ask you, who inspires you?
Many colorectal surgeons, from Bill Heald, Wexner, Silla, Hompes, Knoll, Scott Steele, Tagazi, John Marks, Lua, Marisco, Milani, Paradevilla, Manish Chan, Rodrigo Perez, Angelita Abragama. And as a fourth-year resident, the same year that I met Dr. DeBakey, I also met Randy Bailey, who was my mentor, and told me, you need to be a colorectal surgeon, and I didn't look back ever since then. Last but not least, and most of all, Sergio Larache, my current partner, an amazing human being, an amazing innovator himself, and great surgeon, Sergio Larache.
Well, Sam, I've been furiously writing down those names, and hopefully we'll be able to invite them in a future series, or multiple series, it would seem. So let's talk about your favorite saying or wisdom, maybe to residents or to other people.
Together we can change the world.
Love it. And what is the worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
When I was a college student, my college advisor, I sat down with, and I said, what should I do in my career? And I said, I wanted to be a doctor. She said, don't apply to medical school. You'll never get in.
Now, Sam, outside of surgery, can you tell us what kind of books you read and what are your favorite authors or genre?
Absolutely. Lots of different genres. Leading Change by John Cotter, and also In the Blink of an Eye by Andrew Parker. I'm reading both of those currently. Great books.
Apart from books and music, as we know, Sam, how do you switch off?
I never switch off. Just kidding. We all have to switch off. For me, it's three ways: running, music that you already know about, and spending time with family. I mean, nothing is better than, reading a story to your 10-year-old before she's going to bed.
Yeah. And what would you most like to be known for after your career?
TAMIS.
And Sam, can I ask you, have you any career regrets?
When I was a resident, I did regret for sometimes a second-year resident, and the program director for urology said, hey, Sam, we have this categorical position for you to be a urologist. And I turned that down, and for a long time I regretted that. Really until I developed TAMIS and found my passion, in this area. I just never looked back, and I'm so glad I ended up being a colorectal surgeon. So.
Great. Well, we'll head back to our Twitter polls. So they were really fascinating answers, Sam, and we'll head back to our Twitter polls. Earlier, we asked you all at home to get engaged in our Twitter polls and find out that from the first poll, we asked you, what was your experience with TAMIS? 22% said that they didn't perform TAMIS and they weren't wishing to. 18% said that they don't perform it but wish to. 51% said that they perform it and are in training for it. And 9 said that they did perform but no longer. Sam, have you anything to comment about those results?
Yeah, I think it's surprising that, people tried it and didn't. I would like to know what they're doing instead of TAMIS. One of the reasons I didn't get to tell you, Richard, about why TAMIS was such a great innovation is that it democratized the ability for ordinary colorectal surgeons like myself without TEM training and background to do this procedure. All you needed is any laparoscopically equipped theater, and you could be a TAMIS surgeon with the appropriate training, of course.
Well, in our final poll this evening, we also asked all of you at home what you thought the most impactful innovation in colorectal surgery would be in the next 5 years. And the results of that demonstrated that 12% said stereotactic surgery, 32% said endoluminal robotics, 42% said artificial intelligence, and 14% said virtual reality guided surgery. Sam, what do you think about that result?
I think that the real answer is a combination of all these things. But where we see the most immediate future for colorectal surgery specifically is advancements in endoluminal robotics. And that's what's immediately next. These other things, they're coming, and they're coming fast.
Well, Sam, we've drawn to the end of our time. I'm really delighted that we've had this opportunity to speak to you. It's been so valuable for our global audience. Thanks very much. It's been fascinating and a really wide-ranging interview as well, so it's a pretty special time to be with you. I'll be back with Colorectal Live again soon, when I'll be joined by Professor Antonino Spinelli on the 18th of March for a discussion about his specialist subject in surgical techniques. And now, as a special treat and some much-needed therapy for us all, I'd like to thank the wonderful Sam again, but he's going to play us out with his guitar with a few original riffs into the night. And keep following us on Twitter for more in the meantime on the hashtag ColorectalLIVE. And thank you again for watching us tonight on Colorectal Live. Over to you, Sam.